tree work, bucking, felling, making firewood, logging, all that stuff has always been pretty interesting to me. Now, that's mostly because of my grandfather, who I look up to. Used to be a logger back in the day, and before I was even born, he had already retired. And he always did these small little projects around our cottages and around his own properties. And a lot of the times I was around to watch when he did all this work. So as you can see in this video, he's cutting down this big pine tree at our cottage, which we used to have. Look at that. Huge pine tree. And I always was there watching from the sides, or a lot of times being there watching from the side when he did all this stuff, and it was always interesting. But only around, I would say, 3 years ago, when we moved to the farm, that's when it really became a vocal point of me. Like, it was making these videos and logging. That's really what was the two most interesting things to me. Now, I don't know which one is more interesting, making videos or logging, but I would say they're pretty even, to be honest. But it was always interesting to me, and especially now it is. So I learned how to use a chainsaw very early on, and then I got a old Stihl 024, which we still have, and I used that for about a half year, but then it started giving me issues. So then I upgraded to a Stihl 271, which is the saw that I'm currently using, and I love it. So yeah, basically in this video I kind of just want to show you how I've sort of progressed from just watching from the sides when I was 4 years old, and how I can actually do this work relatively well today. And I also kind of want to take this as an opportunity to teach a lot of you people a little bit more about the logging industry as a whole, and also just cutting down a tree, because it's not all about just turning on a chainsaw and just cutting into a tree. There's a lot more technique that goes into it, and I kind of want to just show you that today. And yes, if you're wondering how this is recorded onto my camera by playing a old mini DV cassette on an old TV. And you can even see the date right there. I believe that says the 5th of the 17th, 2011, 11:30 o'clock. So yeah, that's pretty cool that time and date and everything is there. 2011, pretty cool. That was I believe that's 12 years ago. Now, I've liked chainsaws since I was basically old enough to walk. Really hard to explain it, but in a way it's nostalgic, but it's also just so cool what these chainsaws can do. Now, yeah, you can say that it's bad for the environment to cut down trees and whatever. There's a lot of arguments for it and against it, but genuinely, if you're a responsible chainsaw owner and you don't cut down a whole 8-acre piece of property down, then if you know what you're doing, and you know how to cut down trees responsibly, then these machines are really cool. So, responsibility on a chainsaw can come in a lot of different ways. Now, one is of course knowing which trees you can cut down and which trees you should leave, but one is of course chainsaw safety. Now, I think there's not a single tool where you hear the word safety used more than on a chainsaw, I think. Because while these are cool, these are probably the most dangerous tools that you're gonna have on your arsenal. So it's important to know how to use one of these safely. So, how to use a chainsaw safely? Well, of course, a part of it is to know what you're doing and know how to actually handle the chainsaw safely. But another, and I would say equally, if not a greater importance, is of course safety gear. Now, personally, I have always been a huge advocate for people to use safety gear while they're using a chainsaw, and that's what I always do. Now, if I use a chainsaw, it's a rare day that you would see me without chaps and using a chainsaw. Now, I'll demonstrate a couple sort of things what can go wrong with a chainsaw. This right here is a 026, so it's basically the older version of the 260, which is the older version of the 261, which is a very good professional saw. A chainsaw does not have a blade. Now, a lot of people like to say that a chainsaw has a blade. No, it does not. A chainsaw has a bar and a chain. There is no bar, there's no blade to be found anyplace. Now, I guess you could call the teeth blades, but they're not blades, they're just teeth. Would you call it the teeth in your mouths, small blades? How many blades do we have in our mouths? None, because we have teeth. A chain should be tightened around the bar. Doesn't need to be too tight. Finger rule, I guess, is if you can pull it around easily like this, just one hand without needing gloves, that's genuinely considered a good tightened chain. So yeah, bar and chain. This right here is your chain brake. So what this does is, if your chain is spinning like this and you engage the chain brake, that doesn't spin anymore. Now again, that's really good for kickback situations. What happens during kickback is, if you hit a piece of wood while your saw is running and your chain is spinning, you hit a piece of wood with the tip of your saw, what's gonna happen is that's gonna start running up that piece. It's gonna head right at the center line of your face. And this, if this hits your face, it's gonna leave a nasty mark. So you have your chain brake, works like that, and what happens basically is, you hit a piece of wood, it's gonna start running up that, and boom, that's gonna engage your back of your hand is gonna engage the chain brake, and the chain stops spinning. Now this is your pull cord. Now what Hollywood movies and stuff like that always want to show us is just you pull this and you start it. Well, that's not how it works. So look back here. You see this lever right here? This is your choke lever. So how do you start a chainsaw? Well, first of all, you push your throttle down, push it all the way down. That's full choke. Now if your saw is cold, you put it into full choke, and that's how you start it. So put it into full choke and you pull it until it burps. Once it is burped, I guess, or kind of started up, then you push it one step up like this. You don't want to press the throttle, because then you'll just put it on the on position and then you can't start it. You want to pull it up to half choke, one step up. So just from full choke, you just pull it one step up without touching your throttle, and then you have it on half choke. And then you pull it until it starts. Your chain is going to start spinning if your chain brake isn't engaged. Then you pull your throttle once, and then as you can see back here, I'll show you a little closer. When you pull your throttle, it's going to push it up to the on position automatically, and then you're ready to go. Now of course you want to give it a second to warm up a little bit, because if you just start cutting straight away, that can break your piston in your cylinder, and then you're not going to have a good time. The thing which a lot of people get wrong is where the fuel goes. So the oiler is at the front and the gas is at the back. Now yes, there are different versions which have the oiler and the gas in the same place, but genuinely it's always oil in the front, gas in the back. Now you always want to use two-stroke mix in these. You don't want to use anything else because of the two-stroke mix has the oil in it, and this oils through the gas basically. And I mentioned that a smaller saw may be more dangerous than a bigger one. Now of course, a bigger one has more power, and genuinely it's more dangerous. But with the smaller saw, this is so light that you can move it around in all kinds of directions. And also, when kickback happens, it's gonna happen so much faster than on a bigger saw. Now, and because of the kickback being faster on a smaller saw, that's why people like to argue that these are more dangerous than this. But personally, I say that they're all equally dangerous. But yeah, I think this is enough chitter-chattering. Let's get to work now. So now I'm going to show you just some basic firewood cutting. So, well, first of all, you want to make sure you get the right size of firewood, and you can do that with one of your pre-existing pieces that you have already cut, so you don't need to use a measuring tape. So this first thing is called just basic bucking. Nothing special about it, it's just bring the saw in contact with the wood and cut the piece of wood like this. Really basic, really straightforward. This is probably the first thing that you'll do when you buy a chainsaw. Just do a basic buck. Now, if your log has tension from two sides and it's basically hanging from two sides, then you need to do it in a different way. So you basically need to cut it from the top and the bottom so your saw doesn't get pinched. Now how I do it is basically I do it in one session. So what I do here is I start it normally, but then I sort of, well, you can see it in this other shot better, but what I do is basically start like I would be bucking, but then I bring it into the log, plunge it through the bottom, and then finish the cut from the bottom. So it's much faster, so I can do it in one session and I get a much better result. But I wouldn't do that if you're inexperienced, because that can cause kickback if you do it wrong. So yeah. This next thing is called a plunge cut, and this is definitely not for the inexperienced. It's basically drilling into a log with your saw, and you need to do it in a very specific way, otherwise you get kickback, because you, of course, as you can see, you use the tip of the saw. Now I won't explain exactly how it's done, but yeah. So today I'm actually going to be helping my grandpa cut down these two trees in front of you, because he's going to be extending his parking lot here. And it's kind of fun to do this because I've always watched from the side, and now to actually be able to help him, that's pretty cool in my opinion.